Hey, beautiful people. Welcome to Organizing an ADHD Brain, the podcast for anyone who's ready to ditch the shame and get organized in a way that actually works with their brain. I'm Megs, a professional organizing coach, organizing an ADHD brain owner, and recovering clutter human. While I work primarily with women, this space is for anyone who wants practical tools, mindset shifts, and a new way to look at time, stuff, and self-worth. If you've ever felt overwhelmed, scattered, or stuck in a cycle of starting and stopping, you're not alone. And you're in the right place. Let's build a life that feels calm, doable, and aligned, one mindful move at a time. Hey, beautiful people. Welcome back to another episode of Organizing an ADHD Brain. Thanks for the patience this week. We had Mother's Day this weekend and another birthday celebration. So it has been crazy in getting the podcast out on Monday, but it's Tuesday. It's not that far past, and it gives you a little bit of time to catch up on a previous episode if you'd like. Also, I haven't mentioned this in a while. If you are listening to the podcast, at least on Apple and Spotify, you can actually speed up the episode. I love to listen to episodes on 1.5, 2x, or even a little bit faster speed, just depending on how fast or slow people talk. Even when I'm editing my podcast, sometimes I don't even speak fast enough for myself. So if you're looking for a way to listen to podcasts in a different way, using the speed up or even slow down, because I know that some people like to slow things down too, finding the speed that matches your brain will help significantly. This week, I'm talking to my friend Angela, who is a fellow professional organizer. I'm really excited to introduce you to her, and it was fun the way that her and I got introduced. We have a mutual fellow professional organizer in common, and her name is Kate. She is the digital wrangler. I freaking love her organizing name. And then Angela today is from your space, Reclaimed, the professional organizing community. There's a lot of us out there, but it is a small community, and there's so many incredible humans that you can work with to help you make your life just a little bit easier. Now, before we dive into the episode today, I want to share with you, I have been building my community on the side, and I'm so excited. I originally started the podcast probably a couple months in. I started a Patreon, which if you're not familiar, is just a site where you can go and you can post a bunch of things. There's free stuff, there's paid stuff, but it's a way for people to follow you and support the podcast, of course. But there was something about it. I didn't like the fees. There was just, I just didn't really like it. When I launched my community earlier in the year, I was really excited to do it. I had some great ideas. But honestly, the platform just never did exactly what I wanted it to do. There wasn't enough color, first of all, and it wasn't as user-friendly as I wanted it to be. Now I have found Circle. And I want to thank Ross from the ADHD Big Brother for that, because I don't know that I would have ever found Circle or even had the confidence to try something new again in order to find something that really works. Well, I put hours and hours of work into creating templates and colorful places for us to join and creating this space where we can come and get some organizing done and to connect with other people who are experiencing a lot of the same things that we do with our ADHD brains. Along with not necessarily wanting to do the organizing or don't even know where to start when it comes to getting to the project in the first place. No matter what, I would love to invite you to join the waitlist. It's in the show notes below. I'm going to be launching the new community on May 15th, and there's going to be some really cool stuff involved. There's freebies. By completing the onboarding, you get a free coaching with me, and there's all kinds of really cool stuff. We do quiet body doubling, and we also do virtual decluttering. There's a group coaching every single month. There's just so many cool things. And I'm so excited to continue to build it. I found the place, guys. And I think that's what's so cool about, and I'm going to relate this back to organizing because it's important here. When it comes to organizing, it's important that you start. It's not important that it's perfect, although we are seeking perfection sometimes. But in this case, it was so important that I started something so that I could prove to myself that I could do it. But then I just kept seeking the right place, the right platform, the right everything for me that made sense for the people that I want to invite in. I'm honored that you guys are along on this journey. Thanks for continuing to tune in week after week. Let's go ahead and jump into this show because I'm so excited for you to hear a little bit more about Angela, what she does, her podcast, and of course, what this show is all about, the Enneagram. I am here with my friend Angela, who is also a professional organizer, a fellow podcast host. She's an Enneagram expert. She also talks about being a parent to a disabled daughter with Down syndrome, and she is just fabulous in so many different ways. I'm really excited to introduce you to her today. And Angela, welcome. Do you have any gaps to fill in? I know there's so much more about you than what I've just said, but
No,
welcome.
thank you. Thank you for having me on. I think you covered it.
I'm so excited to chat with you today. We have talked a little bit about the Enneagram and how you use that with your clients when you're organizing and what that looks like. So can you first tell us a little bit about what the Enneagram is?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So the Enneagram is a personality typing framework that helps us understand ourselves and others. It's how we move through the world, how we see the world, how we process information. And it's based on our core motivations, not our behaviors, which is a little bit different than some of those other personality typing frameworks that you might see, like Myers-Briggs or something like that. That's where it is more impactful. At least it has been more impactful in my life. It actually has a lot of ancient roots, but it's really only been in the United States for the past 50 or 60 years. It can be really helpful for us in terms of helping us have some more self-awareness around how we process information, how we think, how we feel, how we go about doing things. By understanding ourselves and understanding other people around us, those people that we share a relationship with, they might do the exact same thing that we might, but for very different reasons. And getting at those core underlying reasons can really help us better communicate. It can help us reach our goals better. It can help us have a less anxious, less stressful time because we can recognize those things that set us off and we can get ourselves back on track. It's really been impactful to me. And so that's why I have been studying it for the last 10 years and sharing it with anyone that will talk to me about it because I'm an Enneagram junkie. I really would love to share it with others, especially those that might have neurodiverse or have disabilities like my daughter. I'm really trying to look into that more because it is so relatively new in the United States. It hasn't really been looked at as far as overlapping with ADHD, neurodiversity, disability. We're just scratching the surface here for sure.
Cool. Yeah, I loved it. I took the test a couple weeks ago and I was like, I don't know what this means. I watched a YouTube video on it and I knew that you were an expert. And I was like, Angela, what do I do with this? And you're like, let's see, let's talk about it. And I love that so much, right? Like when we're excited about a subject, that's all we want to talk about, which is really
Yeah.
cool. But you're also a professional organizer. I have 3 questions to ask you in one, but I think it's doable. What made you become a professional organizer? How did you get into that space? What's your philosophy behind it? And then how do you include the Enneagram in your work that you do?
Sure. Yeah. So, in terms of how I got started in professional organizing, I have to actually give credit to the Enneagram because I was at a point in my life, my kids they were in like middle school, getting ready to go to high school. We had moved. So I was not in the same community that I'd been in for the last 10 years. And they were getting just a tiny bit older and a little bit more independent. And you can call it a midlife crisis. I was like, what am I doing? What is happening to me? And where am I going? How am I moving through this world other than in ways just as my kid's mom, as Casey's mom, as a disability mom? And I wanted something a little bit more than that one identity. And a friend suggested that I check out the Enneagram, and I started listening and I listened to a podcast about it. I started reading about it and I figured out my personality type. And I have a personality type that is what they call self-forgetting. So we take on other people's wants and needs without really realizing our own. And I realized I had been doing that for a long time. And it was time for me to really figure out what I liked and what I wanted to start doing next. And it took a few years, but I realized I started thinking about what am I good at? Like, just as I go through the day, what am I good at? I'm really good at organizing. Like, I've always been good at that. And I was at the beach one day with some friends at a friend's house, and I realized I really wanted to organize her pantry. And I didn't want to go to the beach. I wanted to sit organized. And I thought, there's something like, I wonder why I want to do that. And I think the Enneagram was helpful in allowing me to have some more self-awareness and looking at that from a non-judgmental perspective and saying, oh, why am I having that thought? Or why am I feeling like this? And that was what started me into organizing. And as I was learning about the Enneagram, I was starting to do organizing for other families. And I realized that I wasn't just learning about myself and my Enneagram type, I was learning about all of the types. And I could start to recognize without asking a client to take a test, of course. I'm never going to ask them to do that or say, hey, what's your Enneagram number? But I could start to get an understanding a little bit about their personality. And I would start to cater how I offered my services to those clients. Like, for instance, I had my very first client, I ended up doing their whole entire home. She was a mom of 4. Several of them had ADHD. They were all over the place. And she's what we call the helper in Enneagram speak. She's a 2. And she knew that about herself as we got to know each other. And she shared that with me. And I thought, oh, okay, that makes a lot of sense because she was always focused on for her children and putting their needs first. And I said, okay, we're going to stop everything and we're going to start to work on your closet. I want you to feel like you have your own space and that you have your needs met, even if it's just for this next 2 hours, we're going to focus on you. And so that was just one way, but I think the Enneagram helps us see about our personality, and our personality really has an impact on our relationship to clutter and our relationship to the things in our home. And that is just one tool that I have in my toolbox in terms of how I work with people, and understanding more about ourselves can help us figure out how best to set up our homes, actually. So I think that there's a really strong correlation there, and I try to use that.
I love how you were talking about how it's even helped you in your own conversations with your husband and your kids, and like truly understanding where those core motivators are, right? Like why we're choosing to say or do certain things, which allows you to see things from a new perspective so that you can support someone in what their needs are.
Absolutely. Yes. In fact, I think that's where the greatest benefit of the Enneagram comes from. It's in our relationships with our loved ones, in our work relationships, and our relationship with ourselves, obviously. But I will say it has been very instrumental in improving my marriage with my husband, because we learned things about ourselves, because I, of course, dragged him along on this journey with me about the Enneagram. And so he's learned a lot about it. And it's been so eye-opening to see how we process the information around us so differently. He's a very fast processor. So we'll come up on a situation and say, like, he's driving and there's cars coming here and he's anticipating an accident. I'm still trying to process the fact that we're at the intersection. I'm a much slower processor. And he would be like, why you didn't see this? And why didn't you do this? And I'm like, whoa, I'm still figuring this out. And it was really helpful for us to understand that about each other. That is not really something that I can change about myself, the fact that I am a slower processor than him. So it allowed for a lot of understanding and grace within our relationship. And then when it comes to parenting too, it can be hard to determine our kids' type. We need to let them develop and grow. As we learn the Enneagram, we can get ideas about what type they might be or what those core motivations are. But it's not until they become more of a teenager or young adult that we can really try to get them to wrap their brains around that. But I wish I had known it earlier in my parenting, I will say. Certainly as my son was getting into high school, I was just starting to learn it. That would have been really helpful, because I think we can have a better understanding of how to help our kids, how to parent our kids, because I was parenting him the way that I wanted to be parented, not the way that he necessarily wanted to be parented sometimes. And
Yeah.
so it really can be impactful for our relationships as well. Yeah.
That's beautiful. And you touched on something that I think is so significant and how this correlates to the ADHD community is you talked about how there's certain aspects of yourself based on the Enneagram that you know you can't change. And that's because you can't make your brain process things faster. How would you possibly go about doing that? However, there are things that we can change and adapt to based on what we know about ourselves. And so that's why I have this podcast. Yes, we have ADHD. And yes, sometimes it really sucks. There's some things that we can't change, right? And your daughter with a disability, like she's incredible. And there's things you can't change about her. And so it's about learning about those things so that we can understand, how do we change? And what are the things that we can change? How do we understand ourselves in a way that we can adapt? Like you said, instead of parenting your son the way you think he needs to be parented, parenting him in the way that he needs that from you. So what is that process? How do we figure out what we can change and what we can't change? If you could tell us exactly the answer, that would be perfect.
Sure. Yeah, no problem. How many hours do you have? Oh my gosh, I know. It is really hard, but I do appreciate the Enneagram because it gives us this framework for starting to go down the path of understanding ourselves better. And I think that's what we need to do. The Enneagram helps us look at 3 centers of intelligence. That's what they call them: thinking, feeling, and doing. We all think, we all feel, and we all do. It's our heart, our head, and our gut. The Enneagram helps us look at how we take in information, how we process information, how we process the world. Maybe some people are stronger in their thinking center of intelligence. Others are stronger in their feeling center of intelligence. When we understand those differences, that's where we can start to appreciate and have some grace and compassion for ourselves and for others, how we process that information. What happens when we get stressed? Because things that are probably different from things that would stress you out, the way I then respond to that stress, the Enneagram kind of helps us see that. And if we can recognize that in ourselves by having some of that self-awareness, then we can stop and take a step back and recognize what we're doing and maybe make a change that point in time. If it's something that like, oh, this has always ended badly, let me see how I can respond in a different way. And it gives us that opportunity for self-awareness and reflection, which I think is just, that's how we get started on that path.
Yeah. Okay. And like it comes back to that beautiful saying is accept the things that you cannot change. Learn some things you can. Ultimately, there's certain things about you that you can't change. And there are certain things that you can adapt to based on what you know about yourself. And so as you look at yourself and really truly understand, because it's more than just saying, oh, that's just who I am. It's knowing your behaviors, how you react to certain things. What's your clutter threshold? At what point can you not function anymore? At what point do you just simply shut down? And knowing that so that you can adapt to living a life that just feels a little bit easier because you've recognized those certain things about you.
Absolutely. And I do like to say the Enneagram is not an excuse for our behavior. It's like, oh, well, I'm an 8. I just automatically do that. It's too bad. No, it's not an excuse. It's a way of seeing. It's a way of helping us understand ourselves. And so accepting those things that we can't change and then seeing what we can do to actually bring those 3 centers of intelligence, thinking, feeling, and doing, into balance. Because our personalities are such that we always have a dominant center. If we can bring those into balance, we are actually able to move beyond our personality and incorporate all the wonderful things about all the different types, actually. So that's that enlightenment, that transformation that can happen about understanding ourselves. But yeah, the Enneagram is not supposed to be used as an excuse for behavior, for sure.
Even if you have been using it as an excuse, right? Or like a diagnosis or anything, here's your chance to say, okay, how can I adapt to this now? How can I understand it? No, I think that's really key.
Yeah.
Thinking about ADHD, because when it comes to the Enneagram, just because I have ADHD doesn't mean that I'm going to be the same Enneagram number as someone else with ADHD. We're all so different in what not only motivates us, but what holds us back from doing things. And there's a lot of psychological stuff in there, but then there's also just the natural experiences that we have based on all the symptoms that we have. I know that there's still research being done, but what do you think people with ADHD can benefit from learning their Enneagram type?
I think that by understanding your Enneagram type, you can maybe take some of those things that might be a struggle to you, like impulsivity, which might be a struggle for people with ADHD. Understanding your Enneagram type might help you get at the core motivations underneath why you might be more impulsive, or maybe you tend to procrastinate. It might help you get at those underlying motivations as to why you do some of those things. And then you can have some grace for yourself if that tends to be a struggle for your personality, for your Enneagram type. And then also, okay, what can you do about that? There's so much written about the Enneagram and so much out there. There are resources for each number. And so there might be some resources out there. Okay, if I struggle with procrastination, what are some things that Enneagram 9s who struggle with procrastination and have ADHD can do? And that might help them maybe say that's different from someone who struggles with procrastination and ADHD and they are a type 3 or something.
Interesting.
Yeah. But like I said, I'm currently in this, it's called an Enneagram cohort. It's with Suzanne Stabile and her group here in Dallas, and we meet 4 times a year. It's a very intense class over 4 weekends. And there's several people in my cohort of 35 that have ADHD, and we're all like, there's got to be more information out there about understanding this overlap between our Enneagram personality and our ADHD, because there is some overlap, but how that plays out is still out there to be learned for sure.
Oh, that's so fascinating. And I didn't even ask this. I don't really ask everyone, do you have ADHD?
I don't think that I do. I've never been diagnosed with ADHD. I definitely have some procrastination tendencies. I am familiar with an Enneagram 9 coach. She coaches a lot of Enneagram 9s, and she has a lot of clients with ADHD. I do wonder, I would love to, if anybody could do some research on this, understand if there is one particular type that struggles more with ADHD than others. I don't know the answer to that, but
That's so interesting.
it would be really fun. If it was, it would probably be my type.
Yeah, it was really funny because when I did the test, and I'm a 7, and I was watching a video, and the video was like, okay, if you're a 7 and you're still watching this, most people would have dipped out at around the 2-minute mark because they would have gotten all the information they need and left. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I was about to turn the video off. I was like, okay, this makes a ton of sense. But then I also see putting everyone else first when it comes to your Enneagram. That makes a ton of sense. I see that in a lot of people with ADHD.
Yeah.
I wonder if, without having a medical or science background and studying this, I just wonder if there's certain overlaps to a lot of the different types and things that we experience. But based on the research I've done as far as the diagnostic criteria, it's more about, is it pervasive and is it persistent? Is it something that is just like constant and it doesn't allow you to live your life in a way that makes it easy to do things, right?
Yeah.
But I do find it so fascinating because I think the more you know about yourself, whether it is a diagnosis from a medical professional or simply taking a test to understand some of the things that mean more to you in your life or how you operate, it allows you to look inward a little bit more, to meet yourself on a deeper level.
Yeah.
So you can start to explore, like, I love the way that you approach your relationship in this way. And like, I know my husband and we're always improving our communication, but it's fascinating because I will tell him how I see something and he'll be like, what? And this is how I see it. But because we're meeting each other there and saying, this is how we perceive it. Whereas I know when I grew up, it was more of, we disagree, we don't talk about it. And like, we just push it under the rug and we just pretend that our disagreements or our brain differences don't even exist. But I think that's what's so fascinating about the world that we live in right now is like this information download and overload and stuff. It's happening so fast for us to understand ourselves so that we can understand others in a deeper and more profound way.
Yeah. And I think too, the Enneagram gives us this language for understanding ourselves and for others, and also just permission to notice and without judgment. And that was what really helped move me forward in a lot of my relationships with my husband and with friends. Just being able to, oh, that's interesting. I'm interested in learning more about why you see it that way. It gave us some language and just this permission that we could ask questions without judgment to understand better. And it's just been really eye-opening to dig a little bit deeper for myself and for my family and friends that have been interested in it. Really, it's just a tool that welcomes that and that invites us into that.
So, Angela, tell me, if someone were trying to figure out what their number is, where do you start? Because obviously Google is great. However, what's the best test? Where do people go? Is it free? Do you pay for it? How do we go about doing that?
Yeah. So I am a little bit, I don't know if you could say that I'm old school, but I really think that the best way to learn about the Enneagram and to determine our own type is to not necessarily take a test, but there's a great book out there. It's a very easy primer. There's lots of great books that you could start reading about the Enneagram. My favorite one to start with is called The Road Back to You by Suzanne Stabile and Ian Cron. And it's a very easy primer. It just gives you a little bit of information about each of the types. And I recommend maybe getting that and starting to read that. And then whether it's journaling or taking mental notes, just trying to become more self-aware about how we move through the world, how we process our information, what is stressing us out. When we are confronted with something, is our first kind of reaction to that, do I have a thought or do I have a feeling? Like, is it something inside that where I'm feeling something more than thinking? Or is it like for me, I'm in the doing triad. It's what do I need to do or what needs to be done? That's my first response. For others, it might be a feeling. For my husband, he's in the feeling triad. He is going to have a feeling. He's going to have some really strong, in fact, he's going to have a lot of feelings before I've had one because he's so fast. He's going to have a thought about that feeling and then a feeling about that thought and then a thought about that feeling. And I'm like, what is going on over here? So that just learning about that was really helpful. But so starting to become more self-aware without judgment. Like this is a no judgment zone. It's really to help understand ourselves better. And I think that kind of can take some time. For some people, we might go through and listen to a podcast or read a book and be like, oh, I am definitely this number, I'm definitely a type 7, or I'm definitely a 4. And others, it can be hard to wrestle out, especially if we haven't maybe done therapy work or if we haven't done a lot of self-exploration, self-awareness. It can be hard to really dig at what are our core motivations. And so I really do recommend trying to learn about the Enneagram and starting to just narrow down, okay, I'm definitely not this, I'm definitely not that. And then becoming more self-aware. Okay, what happens in this situation? Tests are actually, they can be a really good starting point. And I recommend there's truity.com. They have a really good test out there. I think they have a free one and then they have one that you can pay for. And the free one, I think, is just fine. The thing is about some of these tests is that because the Enneagram is based on our core motivations, it can be difficult to capture that on a test. And sometimes we aren't even as self-aware enough to answer some of these questions. We might have to ask our spouse or our partner or a friend that knows us well. Sometimes that can be helpful in kind of understanding more about ourselves. So just having some of those conversations, like I heard someone talking about on a podcast, they were saying, I didn't think I was competitive at all. And then her friend heard her say that and just burst into laughter because what are you talking about? You're super competitive. Like, I am, but she didn't realize that. And so even just having conversations with your close loved ones can be helpful. And then trying to narrow that down. But I like to say that the Enneagram it certainly can be entertainment, right? It can be fun. It can be like party talk, right? Conversation at a party. Oh, what's your Enneagram number? And all that is really fun and great. But I think the true growth comes from moving into kind of what information do I need to take from learning about the Enneagram, and how can I help that in my own transformation, in my own understanding about myself, so that I can just be more in balance, have some growth, be a better person, however I define that. And so, yeah, that is probably how I would start, which is a long-winded answer.
I'm here for those long-winded answers. And what I loved about what you said is specifically noticing without judgment. I wanted to paint a picture for that because I think a lot of the times in the ADHD community, a lot of us grew up labeling ourselves a certain way with a lot of judgment, like feeling the shame, feeling the guilt, feeling everything, and really being angry at ourselves for not being able to do specific things because of who we were. And so understanding who you are without judgment means saying, I'm not great with time because of the way that my brain works. And so to be better with time, I have to put something in my calendar immediately, including the address, including who it's with, including the day and time, and understanding what that looks like right away, even if I feel uncomfortable doing it. Because if I don't do that, then I'll never show up. It's not because I don't want to show up and it's not really important to me, but it's because that's how I've learned to work with my brain. I also dealt with feeling like I was always late for everything, and my family made fun of me for being late for everything, right? And so I had a lot of shame around that and a lot of guilt because of it. But then because I realized that I'm not really great with time, it's that time blindness again, I started to understand that, okay, in order for me to show up on time to things, I really have to take it a couple steps back to understand like what needs to be done. Maybe I set timers. Maybe as I'm putting it into the calendar, I can say, oh, I actually need a half an hour to get there. So I'm going to say that I'm going to put it in here. Things like that I've learned to work with myself. And that's not, the calendars aren't everything, but it allows me to say that it's okay if I'm late sometimes, because that's sometimes what happens. And I have good intentions and I'm not going to shame myself because of it. And there's more things that we can start to notice to just say, okay, it's okay that this is the way that this is happening. And is there like this external force that can help me do it better next? Right?
Yeah, because when we take away that shame, it opens, I think, ourselves up to more possibility for how we solve whatever issue may come from that struggle that we have. And when we have that shame, I feel like it shuts our brain down, right? Then we just feel like we can't do anything. And so releasing ourselves of that shame and that judgment and just understanding. I have always struggled with the fact that I am a slower processor than most, and having, especially like my husband laughs at me because I am not really good at like negotiations, especially like in real time, real fast. That is terrifying to me. Or if I'm like all of a sudden confronted and I have a struggle or conflict and I need to respond quickly, oh, that is really hard for me. And I've always felt a lot of shame around that. But understanding that's how I was born, and that was part of my personality type. And I can do things to improve those situations, but I don't need to feel a lot of shame over that just because that's how I was wired. Yeah. So really, and I appreciate the Enneagram for what it is, that it allows us to take this look at ourselves without judgment, without shame, without this prejudice against it. All types have really awesome things about them, really positive, wonderful things about characteristics about that type. And all types have a struggle. It's two sides of the same coin, and we all have that. And it's okay to accept that and work with that and learn from that and grow from that.
Oh, I love that so much. And we're nearing the end, but I really want to talk to my audience about your podcast and how amazing it is. I was telling you before we started that I listened to an episode the other day about how raising your daughter, when you first found out she had Down syndrome, that you thought that your life was going to be over and that it would be significantly different than what you had initially expected. But you now have a podcast for moms of disabled kids. And you talk about organizing because that's important. And I love the way that you end your podcast. What do you ask people at the end?
Oh, go out and reclaim what it is that you need, because my business is your space reclaimed. I feel like organizing is a way to reclaim our spaces. But I think as disability parents, and really as any parents, like we are always trying to reclaim time or energy that we've lost through losing items or stressing about something that didn't end up all that stress and anxiety to begin with. It's all about reclaiming what we need so that we can live our best life, really.
I freaking love that so much. And like, your words are beautiful, the way you talk about the Enneagram, and you have a whole series, right, on the Enneagram?
I did do a whole series. It took me a year and a half to find all those people.
Oh, gosh.
It was like finding 9 needles in 9 haystacks. I found each type that would, then they had a disabled child. It was really great. It was so fun for me. I loved talking to people who had already been on this growth journey. And then as a special needs parent, it was really helpful. So yeah, you can go on and listen to those. You could hear about each of the different types. There's lots of Enneagram podcasts out there. They're so great. But yeah.
Oh, cool. How can people find you?
So my website is yourspacereclaimed.com. And my podcast is called Especially Organized: Sensible Solutions for Special Needs Moms. And it's on Spotify and Apple and all that good stuff. You can find it on my website too. So yeah, feel free to check me out there.
Cool. And then do you work with people in person or virtually or both?
I do both. Yeah, I do both. So I've worked with people all over. And then I do some here in town also. But yeah, I can do virtual sessions. I just did one recently with a sweet mom who had a daughter with Down syndrome, who was a little elementary school age. We worked on her entryway, which is, as you probably know, those entryways, those are big, they're impactful spaces that you don't think about. But yeah, I love to work with all kinds.
And where are you located? If anyone like hears you and they're like, I have to see her in person.
Yeah, I'm in the Dallas area.
Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your expertise with us today.
Oh, thank you for having me, Megs. It's always awesome to talk with you.
You too. I love talking to Angela. I think she has so many great insights about the Enneagram and really just highlighting the fact that when we know more about how we operate and what's driving us, it allows us to truly understand what are the things that we can work on and what are the things that we need to embrace. She also talks about how each and every one of us has strengths. Regardless of what our Enneagram number is or who we are as a human, we have strengths that we can embrace. And we also have things that hold us back. Each and every one of us, we're all human and we all show up in a specific way. We all show up wanting to do our best and we all make mistakes. It's just about understanding what mistakes can help us grow and what mistakes are going to hold us back if we don't learn from them. I would love for you to go check out her podcast. It's so inspiring to listen to her episodes. She's got some really cool stuff going on, and I'm so impressed with what she's been able to do with her business, with her daughter. Also on Instagram, her daughter, so freaking adorable. I absolutely love her, and I'd love for you to go love her too. All her information is in the show notes below so that you can connect with her. Whether you want to organize with her, check out what she has to offer, or just listen to her podcast, she is available to you. Before you move on to the next adventure in your day, I have 2 things to ask from you. If this episode made you feel seen or helped you in any way, would you take a minute to leave a review? It helps more ADHD brains like yours find the show, and it seriously means the world to me. Just scroll down in Apple Podcasts and tap the stars on Spotify. It's quick, it's free, and makes a huge impact. And if you've been loving the podcast, imagine what it would feel like to actually be surrounded by other ADHD brains who get it, where we talk about the hard stuff, celebrate the wins, and finally make organizing doable. My existing community, now on Circle, is opening on May 15th, and I want you to be one of the first inside. So go to organizinganadhdbrain.com/community to join the waitlist. Waitlisters get early access, a sneak peek inside for an event, and a surprise gift I know you'll love. You don't have to do this alone. And honestly, we're not supposed to do this alone. We're supposed to have community. So come check it out. I'd love to meet you. Let's get organized together. I hope you had a really beautiful Mother's Day this past weekend, whether it was you celebrating yourself or celebrating someone else. You've got one of the hardest jobs that's out there. Have an incredible week, and I'll see you next week.
Thank you so much for spending time with me today. I love being a part of your journey, and I hope you found something helpful to take with you. If you're ready to get support in organizing your ADHD life, I'd love to invite you to join my community. It's a space built just for you. And if you're curious about coaching, let's chat. I encourage you to book a free call just to see if it's the right fit. You can get on my calendar directly from the show notes below, and we can have a chat. A quick reminder, I am not a doctor or a medical professional. Everything I share is based on my own experience as well as my coaching expertise. So please consult your doctor for any medical or ADHD related concerns. Until next time, keep going. Right where you are is a great place to start.